In this video, we're going to be talking about Lesson 4 from Unit 1A. In this lesson, we'll talk about segment and angle bisectors. We're going to talk about what those things mean as we go through this. Make sure you're taking good notes, copying down what I write down on the page. Make sure you're listening to the instruction that I give. So first thing we're going to do is write down some vocabulary terms. We're going to talk about these 4 terms, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the definitions. They're going to appear all at once for you, and then I want you to pause the video and copy them down, and we're going to talk about them. All right, first we're going to talk about the word bisect. When we say bisect, that means to split into 2 congruent portions. And it's not just dividing it into 2 pieces that could be unequal, they must be exactly equal or congruent portions. And so there's 2 main things we're going to bisect today. We're going to have a segment bisector and an angle bisector. To bisect a segment, or to have a segment bisector, that is any point, line, segment, or ray that bisects a segment, meaning any point, line, segment, or ray that intersects our given segment at the exact middle to create 2 congruent pieces. And that exact middle point actually is called the midpoint. It's a point that bisects a segment. Okay, think of it as the middle point. All right, as you're listening, if you need to copy this down, pause the video to make sure you give yourself time to do that while I keep talking. If you're trying to write while I talk, sometimes that is a little difficult, so pausing the video is a good idea. Okay, and then lastly, we have what's called an angle bisector. That's any line, segment, or ray that bisects an angle, meaning to split an angle into 2 congruent angle pieces. So let's draw some pictures to go with these. All right, so if I've got a segment AB, and I say that M is the midpoint, that means this segment's congruent to that. Let's say I had a line L that went through point M. That line L would be a segment bisector. Point M could even be called a segment bisector, but M is the midpoint. For an angle bisector, it's going to look like this. Okay, our angle bisector would be ray YR, because it creates 2 congruent angles, and we mark both those angles congruent like that. And so as we go through our examples, we are going to be constructing or sketching these kind of scenarios. So let's take a look. In this first one, we are told that segment AB bisects segment CD at point X, and then they want us to find these lengths if we know some information. So not only are we drawing this, but we are going to use the drawing that we make and the given information to find a value. So we're told that segment AB is the bisector. This does the bisecting of this segment. So I'm going to start with this segment. CD at point X. So X has to be the midpoint. So AB is going to go through, and it doesn't matter how it goes through. But we know that CX then is congruent to DX, and I want to mark those congruent pieces with my tick marks. Okay, and then we want to find the lengths of CD, so this entire thing, and DX, just this portion, if the length of CX is 12.3. So since that is 12.3, and that's exactly half, we know these are congruent pieces. I know XD or DX is also 12.3, so here's what I would write. DX equals 12.3. Remember, when we write just the 2 letters together with no symbol above it, we mean the length. Then CD has to be twice that, because it's 12.3 plus 12.3, or 2 times 12.3. which would be 24.6. So that's what CD equals. And those are the 2 pieces we're going to find. Now, last lesson we talked about what we called segment addition. Well, when we have midpoint, we don't necessarily say part plus part equals whole, even though it could. That's kind of what I did. Part plus part, or part times 2 this time, equals whole. for our midpoint relationship, I'm going to go back up here where we have midpoint written. I want you to write this. 2 times part equals whole. All right, so that's going to be an important kind of word equation that we use to set up some problems. Okay, we're going to skip number 2 and come down to number 3. We're told that M is the midpoint of segment AB, and we want to find the value of x, this variable x, if they give me this expression and this expression. So we are going to do a lot of calculating here, some equation work, so I want to make sure I start with the correct picture. So M is the midpoint of segment AB, so I draw segment AB. I put M in the middle as best I can, mark the 2 pieces congruent. And now we're going to fill in the given expressions. We're told that AM, just this portion, is 15x minus 24. We're told that AB, the entire thing, so I need you to mark from A all the way over to B below like this, is 10x plus 36. Now, I do not want to just set these equal to each other. Okay, I can't do that. In this case, this part should be the same as this other part. I can even write it again if I want, because they are congruent pieces, because that's what the word midpoint means. I have 2 of those then that equal the whole thing. So I could write it as a long addition problem, part plus this exact same part equals whole. Or I could simplify it by doing 2 times part equals whole. So 2 times my part of 15x minus 24 is what equals the whole thing, 10x plus 36. And then I start to solve the equation. Remember to do things like distribute and combine like terms before I start solving. So I'm going to distribute my 2, giving me 30x minus 48. Now I can start isolating x. Remember, we want to get x by itself on one side. Since this is the smaller value of x, I'm going to move it over to the left. So minus 10x from both sides. And then since I canceled those, that's going to move my 48 over there, so I'll add 48 to both sides in the same step. That leaves me 20x equals 84. And if I divide both sides by 20 now, we get a value of x. That's a decimal, but that's okay, 4.2. X is exactly 4.2. But they also ask, what is the length of B back to M? So all I'm going to do is take that 4.2 and plug it into that expression, because AM and BM should be the same thing. So I'm going to do 15 times 4.2 minus 24 to plug it back in. And this simplifies with my calculator. You can see what I did there. Okay, to 39. So the length of BM and AM would be a total of 39. And the entire thing, A to B, would be twice that. All right, one final example, and then we will be done. You'll notice I didn't do these. I'm actually going to have you, after you finish watching the video, try and do these 3 on the right, 2, 4, and 6, on your own before coming to class. Okay, number 5, ray XY bisects angle AXB. So we've got an angle AXB. I'm going to draw it nice and big. It'll be kind of an obtuse angle. Remember, that means greater than 90. And XY is going to go right through the middle. So that's X, that's Y, this can be A, that can be B. Now we are told, or given, that the measure of angle AXY, so that's this angle, is 6x plus 3. So I'm going to write 6x plus 3. But remember, this is a bisector, so that's congruent to that. It's important to mark that. Okay, and the measure of angle AXB, the entire thing, which I draw like this, not the outside, but AXB, that entire angle out here, is 15x minus 4. and they want the measure of angle BXY. Well, that's going to be the same as that, so once I solve for x, I plug it back in because that's the same, since they're congruent. So again, I'm doing 2 times the part equals that whole thing, 15x minus 4. And distribute. So this time I'll subtract 12x from both sides, since it's the smaller one, and I try and avoid negatives. Since I moved the 12x here, that'll leave a minus 4 to get rid of over here, so I'll add 4 to both sides. Okay? And this doesn't work out nice and pretty because when I divide by 3, we get 3.3 repeating, or 3 1/3, which is fine, 3 1/3. We're going to leave it like that. You can see what it looks like in the calculator, 3.3 repeating. And what we're going to do is we're going to plug that back in to this. But when you're using the calculators, either on your own screen or using one of my calculators, the easiest thing to do is to just take the answer that's already in there, the last answer, and just hit times 6. Because that takes that exact value. I don't have to worry about trying to enter 3 1/3 in the calculator. And then hit enter and then plus 3. And we get 23. So our decimal goes away when I plug this back in. So the length of measure of angle, I'm sorry, not length, we're doing angles. The measure of angle BXY equals 23. Okay? So it's very important in this lesson that we draw out our pictures to match correctly first. And that's one thing we can practice when we work on this lesson in class. All right, but what I want you to do before class starts is to take examples 2, 4, and 6, and at the very least, draw the pictures, okay? If you're having trouble setting up your equations, we can work on that together, but I do want you to draw the pictures, read the words, and draw your pictures to have your correct bisectors or midpoints drawn in.